Good evening, everybody. So the Netherland Dwarf is a breed that I've enjoyed raising for many years. It's one of the smallest breeds in our standard, and it's called the General Advertise. As you may know, it comes in a lot of different varieties. And let's just go to the next slide right away. They're judged in 5 groups. We have the selves, which include like black, ruby-eyed white, blue-eyed white, chocolate, blue, lilac. There's the shaded, like the Siamese variety. We give you booties like the chinchillas and the chestnuts. Hand patterns, you see the otters and the martins. And then any other varieties. The orange, the fawn, the himi, the steel, one of my favorites, the broken colors. So they're judged by varieties, but then once the different selves are judged, the judge will pick the best and best option of the self. So it narrows it down to about, if we have enough representatives in all of the groups, at the end of the day, it would be 10 rabbits. 5 best of groups and 5 best options of the groups going for the best of breed and best of opposite. I don't know how, it's hard to see. There's a little a booty, a little chin up there, and unfortunately the light's ruining the tan pattern. It's actually a tan. And one of the brightest tan colors, that's a variety that has a hard time competing on the table. The otters are so strong, the martins are so strong, and it's hard on those little dwarf rabbits to get their really rich tan color. The photograph I found is probably a European rabbit, where the color is sort of stressed over the color. I judged in Thailand last fall, and they import rabbits from the United States and from Europe. I can tell the European rabbits from the American rabbits right away. The fur, better fur, a better color. Tan. Little, 2.5 pounds. I think the kids, an easy breed to handle because they're so small. I always actually like. I'm not really a butcher. I'm probably butchering, but I like small litters. I like to have in the field, kind of easy to sort of place them. I don't have to think about what I'm going to do with so many rabbits. They're a challenging breed because you, in a litter, might only get a couple. You're only going to get, maybe if you're lucky, one show bunny out of the litter. So the percentages are small, but that makes those good ones truly a gem of the dance. This is just looking at weights. They can't go over 2.5 pounds. That's a small rabbit. And you will get larger ones in the litter. You can usually tell right away. I think ears are a big tip-off right away as far as what size they're going to be. Those longer ear rabbits, those longer leg rabbits, usually tend to be the ones that are a little bit larger. The junior bucks and those that are under 6 months can't go over 2 pounds, but they must be at least a pound. Now, at the bottom there, of course, there's the Polish, there's the Petite, there's the Dwarf Auto. We have other small breeds. What I find so interesting about the Dwarf is that it's small, but there should be some substance. It's one of the challenges, I think, is not to have a fine little rabbit. It should look, I was thinking like, I think of dogs or like a pug, you know, something that's kind of sturdy and strong and has a lot to it, even though it's in a small package. Now, I don't know why these are also cut off, but we can do that a whole lot. What this slide is all about is the idea of balance. We heard Caitlin? We heard Caitlin talk about balance with the English spot. I think balance is part of all of the breeds, but there are 2 breeds in particular that actually have a paragraph in the standard that speaks to balance. It's the Great Dane and the Chihuahua. It's the Flemish Giant and the Netherland Dwarf. As someone who's lived with Great Danes and shown Great Danes, I've always felt the bigger they get and the smaller they get, the more that can go wrong in terms of the overall conservation. And I think that's probably why those 2 standards, the Flemish Giant and the Netherland Dwarf, really address this idea of balance. Now, what you can see on that slide down at the bottom are 2 pictures. And the one to the left, if I go like this, you know, the teeter-totter, it's the scale, right? And if the big kid gets on one side, you need 3 little kids on the other side to get that to go back and forth. But oftentimes, we even think of ourselves as being sort of symmetrical. We put a line down the middle. What we have on the right is supposed to balance what we see on the left. And that's the kind of scale that we often think of when we hear about balance. If you ever go to an art museum, you might see what's on the other side. It's called a mobile. And it's by an artist named Alexander Calder. He was one of the first to make these mobile sculptures. And what you might be able to see is a great big shape over here, and then a lot of little shapes over here. And when you look at any standard and the breakdown of points, 50-50, not usually. And the breakup of points, there's going to be something that's sort of the most dominant, that, you know, has the most points. And then, you know, something like a tail might have a point. Something like feet and legs might have a couple points. There's all of these things that when you're judging and evaluating your rabbits, you have to think about how you try to balance all of those various factors. Now, this slide also is about type. And what I did on these slides is I tried to look at the standard and pull out words. When I was working for my license, one of the judges I worked with said, I go through my standard with a highlighter and I highlight all the descriptive words. And under type, short, shorts, right? A dachshund is long, right? A pug is short. And you want to sort of train your eyes and look at proportion. The idea of, you know, the overall short, cavy, you think of, I think the Dutch rabbit is a breed that we use, cavy, round. And then what's so interesting with the dwarf is that with a short, cavy, with a medium to even medium heavy bone, right? A lot of, I know when I was a kid, and I started at the time we get Polish and we get dwarfs. And I think for newcomers, it's confusing as to what's the difference. They're both little rabbits. But one big difference is bone. The proportions are different, the way their colors is different, their fur is different. But you don't look for heavy, medium, heavy bone in a Polish. You do look for that on a dwarf. Now, Calder's mobile with all of those shapes and all of, you know, we no longer have this. We've got all of these things, and when you look at a Flemish giant, when you look at a Netherland dwarf, there needs to be that sense of balance. You might get an amazing head and not such a good body. If there's one part that is excellent, but other parts are poor to the point that they're not balancing each other, you might have to sacrifice a little bit here or there so that all of the parts come toward their harmony. So all of the parts are harmonious as they work together. I don't know. Difficult to see. Let's go ahead to the next. This sort of shows all of the different. Can we do a control minus and see if we'll shrink it? That image just sort of is showing the dwarf in profile and describing all of the different aspects, all of the different things that you have to consider. Like we got short, compact, well-rounded, deep and wide. When I was judging in Thailand, I do this sort of instinctively. When I was done judging, they were watching me. There's a language barrier, right? They don't necessarily always understand the words that I'm saying, but I use my hands a lot. And I like with the dwarf, I'm going like, I got the rabbit, I've got a hand on either side of it, and especially with an animal that has 6 coat, I'm trying to really feel what's underneath that coat. And do I have a body that's narrow, or do I have a body that's got some width to it? With a dwarf, I sort of think of them like a cube. They're not really a cube, but if you have the ball, the height, the width, the depth is equal in all directions. The cube, the width, the height, the depth is equal in all directions. I like to feel that rabbit side to side, front to back, top to bottom, and feel its proportions to see that they are equal and balanced to each other. The rabbit should have depth, but also you can have a deep rabbit. And all these photographs that you look at, all the photographs that people post, all these profiles, you're only seeing a flat, two-dimensional silhouette. And that's where it might look beautiful from the side, but it could be an inch wide from the top, right? You want to see that that animal has the width that goes with the depth and the height of the rabbit.
I have a couple you can use if you like. I have a couple you can use if you like up on the table. Okay.
Now, the little outer illustration at the top, if you can see, has some lines going through it. Vertical line here, another vertical line here. Making a square. And that's why I say things like a cube. It's a rounded shape within a square. At dog shows, we look at their profiles and we say it's a dog, some breeds want a square proportion, others want a little bit of a rectangular proportion. I already mentioned the pug, the koala, the dachshund, and the Great Dane. They're all going to have a different silhouette. We know our Flemish Giant. It's not a square breed, it's a much longer rectangle, right? And even though a rabbit might be rounded, when you look at that width and when you look at the height, that's where you're making your shape, whether it's a square or a rectangle. What this is doing is it's putting that front line right at the shoulder, and then there's another little rectangle coming up in front that kind of goes from the chest up through the eye. But the body type is really looking at that sort of square shape. The other illustration, and this is just one that I borrowed, is of a melon, right? So if I take my hand and I mime a melon, there's the ball, like the cube, its width, its height, its depth are equal in proportion. What they're saying about the melon is the problem is that when you come off the top, it cuts in at the bottom, right? And you've got that undershell animal. So when you take your hand and you go over the rabbit, you want to feel that width at the shoulder, going through the line, like she was doing with those new carcasses, and it should follow through right down to the table and to the base. A lot of times you'll feel, I judge cavies too, and I'll tell people who are interested in learning, I'll say, watch my hand, and you don't squeeze them like they're a piece of fruit that you're juicing, right? The same with the rabbit. You need to be gentle. Dwarfs are excitable by nature. I had a beautiful little steel junior buck I showed. It was his first show. And the judge I liked a whole lot because he had very fast hands. And the rabbit, even though I posed him a lot at home, and as the rabbit got excited, his hands went faster. You actually have to be the opposite, I think. That's when you need your Zen moment. You need the calm blue ocean, and slow down and allow the rabbit to kind of relax. But cavies have that sort of sausage shape. My baby friends don't like to hear that. But if I put my hand over the shoulder with the guinea pig, I want a parallel set of sidelines. So I'm feeling with a little gentle firmness at the shoulder, and if it starts to widen out, which we want in some rabbit breeds, if it starts to narrow, as we were looking at those carcasses, and some of them are getting narrower as they go back, you can really feel the proportion of it. With the dwarf, I want to feel that evenness of width, front to back, going right down the table. Now, if my melon, though, here's my problem with this picture. If my melon has equal height, width, and depth, what happens when I cut it in half? Yes, it might go down to the table, but I just changed the whole proportion. And now I'm going to have the height, I'm going to have the width, and I'm going to have the depth, but it's going to be a shorter shape. Silhouettes, that first one is the one that they're nice and round. One, next one on the top, these are the one, flatter, back one. In the second row, the first one is blown off. All of these are looking fairly compact. I know from my experience reading them, you will get animals that look, sometimes it's not a huge amount, but the difference between this and this is a short rabbit versus one that's a little bit longer in body. I thought they all looked angry. See the green check mark though? Two parallel vertical lines. Now the one next to it also has two parallel vertical lines. So what do you notice about the proportion? Narrower. They're coming in together. So as you look at that from the front, and then the other one, angled, right? Come around the shoulder into the hind quarter, you're going to see that angled line like you saw in your spot, where that back end looks like this. We don't want that on the back end, we don't want it on the head. Now, 35 points on the body. 35 times 3 is over 100, right? So we're a little bit over a third of the points. So on that mobile, the big shape, or the tight shape. Right? Then we've got 15 for the head. It's less than half of the body. But you put that with the ears, another 15, and then you got 30 up front there. And so it is a breed, even though it's not exactly this, where I think of it, maybe I shouldn't, but I sort of think of it as a head breed. You know, when I think of a Hollow, when I think of a Netherland Dwarf, there's something about that head that right away sets an impression. And that idea of balance, if one part is missing, the other parts are probably going to be missing too. So it all sort of works together. I get excited when I see a baby with really good ears and nice, thick, short, strong front legs, because chances are the other traits are going to come with it. Ears, well set on top of the head. Look at the back corner of the eye, you go up, and it should be a vertical ear. It should be, I think, the head round, the body round, the eye round, the ear round. You see a pattern there? Right? There's a sort of repetition of this sort of roundness going from the head to the eye to the ear to the body. And then that sort of sense of massiveness. I like that. I think the ear could be too small. I think some of them go out of proportion when they have these tiny, tiny little ears. Yes, it's a dwarf rabbit, but that shape has to be in balance with the head. Yes, they could be too big, but they can also be too small. I like a stocky little short ear that's balanced with the head and the body. They can go too long, of course. There's this called shaping. Common faults, big ears, bow ears, ears kind of angle back. You want a vertical ear, but a nice rounded, open shape. That one really bad. Ready for takeoff. I think you see that more in the Holland lot than you do on the floor.
Right.
So, really bad. But you can see right before that are those clothes here. They don't have to be touching like on a Polish, but they should be vertical and sort of parallel round. The one in the top row in the middle, that's the second row. I would think I'm about to get bit. laying their ears back. Well, almost any animal does that. Look out! But they can have a natural parent like that. It's just, you know, it seems again, I don't think attractive in the whole picture of us surrounding the animal. Here's something now. We got 35 on body, 15 on head and ear each. We're up to 65. I don't think I have all those points in here, but the other one I have here is the fur. I think dwarfs can be all over the place with fur. And even though it's only 10 points, here's where your whole balance picture can go off of it. This is a breed that came from Europe. They still bring rabbits from Europe. The things that they emphasize and breed for can be a little bit different than what we breed for. They have qualities I think we bring rabbits over for try to put into ours, but at the same token, other traits come with that. Fur that's too long, fur that's too thin. Dwarfs will produce really babies, but even short of that, you don't want a coat that's too long. It should be dense. If I were to close my eyes and feel a dwarf fur, it's probably not as long as a mini lot, but I like that really thick, lush, but short rollback fur. It is a rollback. There's another difference between your Polish and your Netherland dwarf, a rollback fur. Now, it's not the oldest breed. You can have been around a little while. No. Even with not a great projection on the wall, these are standard of protection pictures. And it shows incredible changes in types over the years. I'm getting a little bit old. I still have standards from the 1970s. And I had friends who were breeding dwarfs, and they did look very different from what you're seeing now. If you can see it in the top left, the Siamese stables from one of the old 1970s standards, you can't put a square over that. That's a replica, right? Very long and body. You'll still see animals with these, you know, with high quality, but more with, you know, getting to the good pictures. Ears don't look, you know, perfectly vertical. They look like they're laid back. They look a little bit probably thin. Those traits kind of, I think, go together. That ear goes with that body. And even though that first picture, holding its front limbs underneath a little bit, I think that was the first standard when they had color photographs, because the second photograph is from the color pictures in the front. Can you see those front legs? They're long and thin, right? I like those. If you ever saw the Sphinx, of course I really look like the Sphinx, but I like that. You know, we might have missed one slide that showed an example of between the front limb, that chest, that you should, they say 3 fingers. Well, I still kind of how thick your fingers are, what your hand is like, but if you only can fit 1 finger between those front legs, you have an extremely narrow chest. My babies, as they come out of the nest box and I start to handle them and look at them, one of the first things I look for is this, not this. And here, you've got the bone, you have the width of chest, you have the ear, you're probably going to have a lot. That middle picture, the ears are angled back, they're long, the lid is long. You see how that top line slopes off? To me, the white is getting a little bit better in the third picture, but to me it's still not square. It's still, if I were to measure the height and the profile, measure the width, I think they have a little bit more length than that cut. Bottom row, getting a little bit, getting a little bit more current. You can see that white with the blue background is definitely getting a little bit more square. Hard to see the photograph, sorry, but that outer in the middle definitely has been better picture. There's a little booty in the last, and what I really hope you see there, the ears look like triangle. It makes the color photo in the standard, but it's definitely, it's a little bit of an older standard yet, but it's not that round shape. If you don't, I like to see that brown, 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 white, parallel, full. Some of you kids are too young to remember Madonna. All of this, you know, round, 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 parallel, you know, you can feel it, right? Even if you can't see it. Any questions? Of course, a lot of varieties, lots of choices. There are a few color DQs. There's one variety when it comes on my table, if it comes on my table, opal. First thing I do is look at the undercolor. They're notorious for having a wrong undercolor. You get a white undercolor on them.
What's the rarest variety Netherland?
The good ones.
What was the question?
Well, there's a lot of good ones. I think in itself, you kind of see a lot of the lilac. The same thing, kind of those recessive varieties, like the loose, like India goodies, the links, don't come on the table a whole lot. At the bigger national shows, you'll see all those varieties. The tan that we saw earlier, like in the tan pattern group, you'll see a lot of otters. There's usually quite a few martins, but probably fewer sable martins, even fewer smoke martins. I think the tan itself is probably one of the rarest.
Oh, there's an oddball in there. A little junior. Oh, no, here.
Down here. Just on this side. This side.